Hello dear teachers, welcome to a new lesson which is on the ELT textbook. This is the topic of the sixth session. Today I'm going to elaborate on the topic of textbooks in English language teaching. As you remember in the previous sessions when I was introducing and talking and defining language teaching and learning materials, we said that one form of material is in printed form or in printed version. They are usually called textbooks, or a pack of materials, usually in printed form, are called textbooks. Let me be clear about one important point, that in no way I want to say that textbooks are and should be important, but they are central, they are significant, because they are usually used by teachers, learners, and also authorities, or prescribed by authorities. One of the most frequently used and popular forms of materials is textbook. It is important to study textbooks. It is important to familiarize ourselves with the qualities, features of textbooks and textbook evaluation, or textbook, for example, writing. But let's go to the important point of the centrality of this textbook. Why I mean that textbooks are central. Textbooks are central, and I don't mean that textbooks should be central. Textbooks are central. Actually, as a teacher, and also as an experienced teacher, as a learner, as a material evaluator, I myself believe that sometimes teachers may avoid using textbooks, or other forms of materials are better to be used. But whether we agree or disagree with textbooks, whether we are in favor of textbooks, or we are against using textbooks, the textbooks are used by language teachers. They are prescribed by the authorities and policymakers. They are used by language learners. Accordingly, it is better to know the textbooks, the principles and features, the quality of the textbooks. First of all, why textbooks are central, why textbooks are important. Okay, let me remind you that by centrality and significance of textbooks, in no ways I mean that they are important or they should be important. They are important because the stakeholders, the practitioners, rely on them, are dependent on these textbooks. Why it is central? Because it provides a map for teachers, it provides a map for learners, and also it provides a map for administrators or decision makers, policy makers. For example, about authorities or policy makers, how they can force teachers to teach the way that they want, how they can force and ask the teachers to teach the content they prefer to be taught, how they convince the learners to study and learn the knowledge that they prefer through textbooks. So textbooks are means in hands of policymakers and authorities to convince the readers, convince learners, and also teachers, syllabus designers, materials developers to teach and learn whatever they prefer. So the decision makers, policy makers, syllabus designers use textbooks in order to impose their ideas and force or convince or encourage the other stakeholders to teach what the ways they prefer. And also teachers usually prefer to use textbooks or previously designed and developed textbooks. Why teachers actually prefer to use textbooks? Because it is easier. Because teachers are not independent and autonomous teachers. Because teachers need a map, the teachers need a pathway to follow in their teaching in terms of the content to deliver, in terms of the content of the assessment and content of instruction. The textbooks determine the methodology and the methods they are going to use. The texts, the passages, the exercises, the practices. So the textbooks provide the teachers the syllabus they need. So the syllabus is not necessarily of high quality, but teachers prefer to use a teacher-friendly syllabus. The syllabus provided, by syllabus I mean the content, the grading, the sequencing, okay, the exercises, the practices, the content, the passages, the text, all the things included in the textbooks, okay? So the teachers prefer to use textbook because it is easy to use a textbook. Because textbook works like a map, an easy map, okay? A simple map. This simple and easy map is not necessarily of high quality, but because it is teacher friendly, teachers actually prefer to use them. But there's some shortcomings to this way of using textbooks. You have seen that the textbooks are not perfect. For example, the chapter now, this chapter you're going to study. There are many details and there are some major ideas. If you study this chapter, you find that not all details are essential. There are some major points, but some details are not essential, they are unnecessary, they are actually distracting. The textbooks are like this, that sometimes they are distracting, sometimes they are discouraging, sometimes they are introducing distorted artificial language. Not always the textbooks are actually useful and the textbooks are of high quality. So teachers use textbooks because textbooks are teacher friendly. The other thing is that the teachers, by using textbook, can convince the readers and the parents of their learners that they are being standard, they are following standard, the norms of education. Unfortunately, when teachers do not actually use textbooks, some parents and learners think that now because the teacher is not using a textbook, so he's not actually meeting their needs or following the standards and norms. Again, the materials, if used by the teachers, are usually in form of textbooks. Why learners prefer to use textbooks? Because again, learners need to have a map, learners need to have some particular passages, text, exercises, and practices. It is difficult for learner to find their own practices, their own exercises. So the textbooks are usually teacher friendly and learner friendly. That's why that all three groups of policymakers, teachers and students prefer to use textbooks. But it doesn't mean that the textbooks are of high quality. The textbooks that are used by these groups of policymakers, teachers, and learners are usually of low quality. Any textbooks, national textbooks, teacher-made textbooks, and also commercial textbook or other textbooks developed by other groups. Okay, the other topic that I'm going to elaborate on is the functions of textbooks. Textbooks are used to serve some functions. Sometimes the textbooks are informative. The textbooks simultaneously can be instructional. The textbooks simultaneously can be experiential, eliciting, exploratory. Let me go to these actually functions and qualities of the textbooks one by one. Informative. The textbooks inform students about language. When you study a textbook and you learn something about language, for example, you learn something about simple present tense, I'm sorry. You learn something about simple present tense, so it informs you. Or you are reading a chapter and it talks about word formation, prefixes, and suffixes. So it only informs you. Informs you about language, about the structure of language. You see that this quality and this function is present in all textbooks. Then instruction. Instructional purpose of or instructional function, the quality of the textbook actually help teachers to give their students some practices, exercises of the things they have studied in informative actually task of textbooks. So you can see that all textbooks are informative and they are instructional. Instructional means that they include some content. The content is used by the teachers and provided to the learners to practice. But what is much more important than these two is the experiential function of language. The high quality textbooks should provide students and learners with an opportunity to experience language they have studied. If the textbooks provide the learners with a condition or with conditions, with opportunities and spaces to experience real life language, so it is called experiential. The other one, which is again much more important than the first two, and it is as important as the third one, it is eliciting. Eliciting means asking the students to use or put in use whatever they have learned. And finally, textbooks are used for the purpose of or for the function or have exploratory function. They provide learners to explore, to discover about language. Here, they inform students about language, but here, in the last one, they give students the space to discover about language. If we want to have an evaluation of the textbooks you have used so far as a learner or as a teacher, the textbooks are usually informative and instructional. They lack the quality of being experiential. They lack the quality of being or having eliciting ability, and they lack the quality of being exploratory. So a high quality textbook, in addition to being informative and instructional, provides learners with the opportunity to experience language they have used in real life situation. They give the students opportunity and a space to use whatever they have learned, and they give the learners the opportunity to discover about language. So these five actually functions of textbooks are very important, especially number 3, 4, and 5. Here there's a question. From now on, if you want to evaluate a textbook, if you are asked to evaluate a textbook, you should consider these functions. Whether the textbooks provide students the opportunity to experience, the opportunity to use, the opportunity to discover about language, so the materials can be actually classified as high quality materials. Let's go to the next one. Here, now let's go to consider different types of textbooks. Textbooks are categorized in some ways. The major two ways through which the textbooks are actually classified are in terms of their target and also in terms of their focus, and the second one is in terms of the developers. Some textbooks are developed or written for international markets. It means that, for example, in the United States or in Britain, the materials developers, experienced materials developers, try to write textbooks which are used by the learners and teachers around the world. They are called international market textbooks. It is misleading. Sometimes learners may think that these textbooks are of high quality. Yes, they have been written by professional, they have been written by native speaker, materials developers and teachers. But the problem is that these textbooks, international market textbooks or commercial textbooks, are neutral. It means that they do not consider the needs of actual learners. They have been written for all groups of learners, but you know that learners are different from different parts of the world. Iranian learners are different from Japanese, from Iraqis, from Afghans, from Chinese, or European learners, or American learners, because of their background, because of their experiences, because of their socio-economical conditions or socio-historical conditions. These international market textbooks are not of high quality textbooks, generally or mainly because they have not been written for specific groups of learners, and they do not consider the needs and purposes of the actual learners. The other type of textbooks are textbooks written for specific age groups. Some textbooks are written for example, the age groups of for kids, for teenagers, and some of the textbooks are written for in order to develop specific skills. You may be familiar with this type of textbooks. For example, in Iranian context, you usually find textbooks which have been written to develop students' reading skills. If they are of high quality, they can be actually useful textbooks. But these textbooks should be evaluated in terms of their effects on the learners. Sometimes the textbooks are developed to prepare students for exam. For example, TOEFL preparation, IELTS preparation, or concours preparation. Sometimes textbooks are used as a reference. For example, those called dictionaries or reference books. Sometimes textbooks are written for specific purposes. For example, the textbooks written for academic writing. The textbooks have been written to help learners learn academic language, academic reading, academic writing, academic lecturing, paper writing, and things like that, which are mostly academic or for academic purposes. Sometimes you see we have readers, a series of readers, or the reading passages sequence in terms of their difficulty and complexity level. And if students want to do self-study, so they need to refer to self-study textbooks or textbooks written for a student's self-study. Again, the textbooks can be classified in terms of their developers. So the first classification is based on the target group, is based on the focus or the focus group. But here, it is classified based on the fact that who is the developer and designer of textbooks. The textbooks are mainly commercial textbooks. Commercial textbooks are usually developed and designed by a publisher, and they are commercial textbooks, the textbooks used by the teachers, practitioners, and learners around the world. And some textbooks are national textbooks. For example, in the Iranian context, if you consider the textbooks designed and developed for Iranian junior and senior high school students, they are national textbooks developed by national authorities, developed by the Ministry of Education. Usually these textbooks are developed in order to actually prescribe the content, prescribe the methodology, and prescribe the policy of education. And the other one is teacher-developed materials. The teacher sometimes develop their own materials, and this type of material, if professionally developed, if developed by a high-skilled, if developed by a teacher of high quality cognition with required skills and identities, these textbooks are the best type of textbooks because The teachers develop material for their own students. The teacher consider the needs of their own students, and then they decide on the content, on the exercises, on the practices, on the language content and other content of textbooks based on the needs and purposes of actually their own students in their actual classes. You can think about it. Which type of textbooks are used in your classes as learners and as teachers? Are the textbooks commercial? Are the textbooks national? Or the textbooks teacher made or teacher developed? And what are the shortcomings and advantages of each group of the textbooks you have experienced and you have used? Okay, and let's go to the third actually part of today's lecture, which focuses on content of the textbooks. Textbooks are important because of their content, because the content included and inserted in the textbooks are key to education. Actually, the content are of two types. The first one is language content, and the second one is usually called other content. By language content, I mean that the language features, language skills, language elements and components which are included in the textbooks to be instructed, to be learned by the learners. The other actually content section refers to the treatment of age, for example, how the textbook treat gender, what features of culture target international, global, or source culture is included. Varieties of language, for example, the textbooks are focusing on Black English, Native English, World Englishes. The other one is that the lifestyle or styles which are included in the materials, or materials are encouraging the readers to adhere to particular lifestyles, or they are introducing particular lifestyles. In terms of art and arts, what arts or art is included, is introduced, is focused in the material. The situations included in the materials, the topics included in the materials. You see that in Iranian context, the textbooks include particular topics, not topics of interest of all learners. The topics are interesting for a particular group of students or particular group of authorities. Or if you see the international actually textbooks, the topics are common topics. For example, you see something on dancing, something on ceremonies, something on global issues, things like that, which are of no interest for international authorities. So one of the areas or one of the aspects which determines the significance and centrality of the textbooks is the content it carries, because the textbooks are for teaching and learning a language. Half of the content, or the main part of the content, is language. And the other part of the content is treatment of age, treatment of gender, how genders are actually treated equally or unequally. or source and target culture, global or international cultures or world cultures, language varieties, lifestyles, art, situation, and topics. These things are very important. That's why that the authorities, the policymakers usually try to force practitioners, teachers, and learners to use textbooks because through these textbooks they can include or force the learners and teacher to focus on particular age, focus on particular culture, include particular culture and exclude other cultures, or actually be biased about some varieties, be biased about some lifestyles and exclude ours, or include ours, or include and exclude some situation. Some topics are preferred over the other topics. Okay, so that's why this content is much more important than this content, especially in countries, in nations, in societies which the decisions are more often ideological. It means that the textbooks are not neutral. Despite the fact that they are on language, okay, they are used for language teaching and learning, but they are teaching and learning, they are actually used to teach, to convince the readers, the users, to learn particular actually aspects of human life. Sometimes the decision maker are biased of age, they are biased of gender, they are biased of culture, or they're biased of cultural norms. In a single country, we have different cultural norms, but sometimes the authorities are biased of or about some traditional norms, and they are actually excluding some other customs. They include some particular customs, and that's why that this content is much more important than this content. And in terms of language content, I mean the features of language, the skills of language, the elements of language which are included in the textbooks and which are aimed to be instructed and learned. The materials are either constructed and authentic. What should happen is that the content should be authentic. Constructed means that they have been written by the intuition of the teachers. For example, a dialogue have been developed and written by the teacher. So these dialogues are not actual dialogues. They are not actually used in natural language context. They are not in real life, based on real life interaction. The authentic materials are the materials which are genuine. For example, the dialogues included in the textbook or the text or the task are genuine. They are real. They are used in real life situation. The advantages of this authentic materials over the constructed material is that whatever students read here or learn here is whatever they are going to use in the future. So whatever they learn is what they use in the future. So there is a match between what is taught, what is learned, and what is used. But in constructed material, there is a mismatch between what is taught and learned and what is used or what should be used. Here, the language features are usually distorted. They are artificial. They are not actually identical to or similar to life situation features or language. That's why that learners may learn for 100%, but when it comes to use, they do not use them because They should not be used in real life situation. And the other point is that if you want to use authentic materials, there are two ways, there are two methods. The textbook should be informed by discourse and corpus analysis. By discourse and corpus analysis means that, for example, if you want to include some actually high quality reading text, this text should come from its discourse. They should be real life actually texts. You go to the discourse of, for example, academic discourse, and then you find some sample texts, representative text. Corpus analysis means when you analyze a large number of texts, a large number of language features, a pile of language using software, and you find the frequency and similarity of the text, and you focus on or select the representative features and texts which are common and shared by all or most of the text or language users. Again, content carried in the textbooks are of great importance, because this content is divided in two parts: language content and other content. Language content refers to language features, language skills, language components, and elements included in the textbook to be taught or learned. This actually content should necessarily be authentic. In order to provide authentic materials, the material should be informed by discourse and corpus analysis. The advantage is that whatever you teach and learn is whatever you need to use in the future. But here in constructed materials, the materials you use and you provide to the students learn what that they do not use in the future. So they are actually, to some extent, wasting their time. Let's go to the next part. In this section, I am going to talk about material selection and material adaptation. One of the important points about textbooks is that the textbooks should be selected by the teachers or by the students if they are going to be used for self-study. These materials first should be evaluated. Evaluation has two actually parts, two stages. In the future, I will focus on these two important actually aspects of evaluation. For example, let me evaluation, yes. The first one is analysis. Analysis is different from evaluation. Analysis or textbook analysis, textbook description only focuses on analyzing. For example, the textbook says that my objective is to improve oral skills. The textbook is written for high school or advanced levels or intermediate level students. The textbook is developed to improve, for example, or to focus on reading and writing, or to cover these topics, or to focus on these situations. You only describe, okay? You see that, okay, dialogues or conversation or interactional abilities have been included in the textbooks, are the aims of the textbook. So it doesn't refer to what the extent or the quality of the actually the sections or the skills included, the practices included in the textbook. For example, you only here describe the textbook in terms of number of units. You say that, okay, there are 10 units. They are 10 units, and in each unit is of, for example, 10 pages. But you do not evaluate or assess the quality, the effectiveness of the materials. You only find the organization of the units, first oral skills and then, for example, written skills. This only refers to the description of the materials. Here something may be present here, but its quality is actually assessed and evaluated in the second stage, which is called evaluation. For example, if here you have a section called conversation, if there is one or two dialogues, you say that yes, there is a provision of conversation. Conversation is aimed at by the author of this textbook. But is that conversation authentic? Is it useful? Is it effective in helping learners to improve their conversation and interactional activities? Is the job of evaluation. So in the evaluation stage of material selection, you assess the effects of textbooks or materials on the learners and teacher. Teacher appeal, learner appeal, it means that does the textbook meet the teacher's need, the student's needs? What in terms of the content? Do they include source and target knowledge, culture? Do they provide the students with activities or with materials on pragmatics in terms of language content? For example, the reading included in the textbooks are used for reading aloud, or they are used for developing reading comprehension abilities, critical thinking. Okay, so if you want to only describe what sections, what topics, what skills have been included and to what extent, it is called materials analysis. But if you want to see the quality of those sections, topics and skills, it refers to evaluation. In the future, I will actually elaborate on evaluation and also the norms, the standards, the criteria, the checklist used for evaluation. We will practically involve in evaluating the textbook written for Iranian junior and senior high school students. Then you will be familiarized with the task of evaluation, and you learn how to evaluate materials against the criteria proposed in the current literature. A teacher sometimes needs to adapt materials. Adapt material refers to the fact that one of the important points you should remember is that we adapt high quality textbooks. The textbooks which are based on actual student needs. I mean that you cannot say that I am adapting a low quality material. The low quality material textbooks are low quality, so it's not possible to be adapted. When we are adapting, we are talking about of high quality materials. High quality materials are materials which are based on the norms of material development, principles of language teaching and learning. But why do we adapt? We adapt because the textbooks have been written for example, students, global students, but our students are specific groups of students. We need to adapt the textbook based on the needs of our students, purposes of our students. So In order to do adaptation, we add material to address an examination requirement. We extend to provide additional practice. For example, you see that, okay, the textbook is useful, the textbook is of high quality, but we need to include some more practices. Sometimes the textbooks are international textbooks. Okay, we need to localize the textbook. Sometimes you modify the content. For example, the cultural content, the lifestyle, the arts. You decide that, okay, so these arts should be included in the materials. So modify the content. You modify sometimes the task or the problems included in the materials. So when we talk about materials, teachers usually need to select materials based on first analysis and description of the materials. Then the most important part here is evaluating. Analysis refers to the description of the content of the material, the appearance of the material, the analysis of the material. Evaluation refers to the effectiveness of the materials on its user, teacher, and students. One of the other importance should be mentioned here is that evaluation should happen prior to the course, while the course, okay, and post-course evaluation. So pre-course evaluation, while use or while the course evaluation, and post-course evaluation if you want to have a better evaluation of the materials and textbooks. Okay, here one of the important points that you see is that we usually have two paradigms or paradigmatic view of course books, or it means that the course books are usually written based on these two paradigms. Actually, they are usually written based on this one. Okay, a few of the textbooks are written based on educational alternatives or alternative paradigm. The first one is dominant paradigm in foreign language teaching. This paradigm means a set of assumptions about world, assumptions about knowledge construction, and learning knowledge. Proposed educational alternative, again, is a paradigm or a set of assumptions or beliefs or principles about world, about knowledge and knowledge construction, and about reality. Okay. Here, the first paradigm, which is very common, especially in Iranian L2 context and education, it is this: language teaching as a skill training. You see that most often the materials developers, the teachers, the parents, the students, all of the stakeholders believe that, okay, there is some passage in the text of reading comprehension. If you read them, if you learn the vocabulary items, so then you read. You develop and improve your reading skills. So it is language teaching is viewed in terms of a skill training. But here in the alternative paradigm, language teaching is seen as education. I have always tried to say that education goes beyond content learning. Education goes beyond subject matter learning. You students are educated to have a better lives, to live better lives. Okay, so they are not here to learn, for example, a number of vocabulary items or grammatical structures. So learning or language teaching should be viewed in terms of education, in terms of producing autonomous and successful citizens, not a skill training. Impoverished and conservative, rich and critical. Okay, so here in this view, it is impoverished, it is conservative. Okay, they do not ask students to be critical, to question the status quo, the present situation, condition. But here the the materials and textbooks are rich. They allow students to be critical, to question, to have innovations and bring about new ideas. Then in this paradigm, the materials are instructional and monologue. Instructional for the second function of the textbooks are used. And monologic, it means that they are only taught by the teachers. They are instructional, it means that they are used by the teachers to give students some practice of language. But here, the textbooks are educational, they are dialogic. Educational means that they are used for knowledge construction, not knowledge learning. Here, knowledge is provided by the textbooks and teacher, and the students are learners of the knowledge, they control knowledge. But here, learners together with the students and with the textbook construct knowledge. Reality is relative. We have different realities, not one reality based on the students' understanding and experiences. It is dialogic. Dialogic means that in form of dialogue, both are groups, learners and teachers are involved in teaching and in learning, in assessing. Here in the traditional one, culture occupies the background. The culture is not that important. Here, culture is much more important because it is believed that the culture determines language. The culture determines meaning-making choices. The culture influences language features, appropriateness of language features. Here, communicative competence is the aim. For example, we have communicative language teaching method in Iranian L2 education or textbooks. It is believed that it is useful to develop a student's communicative competence. But what is important is developing intercultural competence. Intercultural competence means that because the culture influences and determines the language features, we should learn not our national college, only national or target culture, but international culture, culture of Japanese, culture of Afghans, culture of Muslim countries, and culture of the global countries. Here, native speaker model is used. For example, they focus on British English or American English. But here we have intercultural speaker model. It means that world English should be used because proficiency is important, not native likeness in terms of accent. Those who are proficient user of language, so they are better user of language. So in the future, you do not speak to, for example, to make yourself understood by native speakers. You want to speak to and write to make yourself understood by Japanese, by Chinese, by Russian, and language users of other parts of the world. Here, the aim is to enable learners to survive as tourists and consumers. But in the alternative one, aim is to create learners who are internationally, socially aware. Okay, so they are critical thinkers. They are aware of the events happening around the world. Learners construed as a skill acquired. The focus is on a skill. Learners are see, okay, so do you study language? So you are learning writing. So can you write? Can you read? But here, learner are introduced as apprentice ethnographers. Ethnographer means that you are in the field. You are actually citizens. You're learning how to be a successful citizen, not you're learner of skills. You're learning, you're acquiring the identities of a successful citizen. Textbooks as career superficial view of target culture. Textbooks are career less realistic view of target culture. For example, here you see that this happens again in Iranian context. When we talk about culture, they think that Farhang is usually understood in terms of introducing some, I don't know, some special text, some photos. But in terms of culture, we should be realistic about the culture. Culture means lifestyle, ways of being, doing, acting. So if we talk about culture, we mean the lifestyle by culture. Here, culture means the superficial, actually, realization of culture, for example, newspapers, movies, films, and things like that. Okay, thank you for your kind attention. It was a long, actually, session, and because of the details, I had to cover all of the materials and all of the details or points included in the textbook. I will give you some questions that you may focus and think about these questions. The questions are used in your final exam. If you think about them, you will prepare yourself through thinking about them to provide solution to the problems I will give in your final exam session. Okay, thank you for your kind attention. I will back to you with a new lesson.